My name is Bridget Stryker. I'm the local history coordinator here at Boone County Public Library in Boone County, Kentucky. We are at the Dinsmore Homestead, built in 1840. It is a typical Kentucky homestead where they held enslaved for many years up until the Civil War. And so this is a great location to kind of talk about the enslaved mothers and the lives of women who were enslaved here in Boone County. So the story of Jenny Stevens is very compelling. She was an enslaved woman born about 1830 here in Boone County down by Rabbit Hash along the Ohio River. She was born to an enslaved woman and her slaveholding father. So her father was also her slaveholder, Benjamin Stevens. So her mother and as well as her full sister also lived with her. They were enslaved. They had to work on the farm. They were not treated equally as the other children that Benjamin Stevens had with his white wife. So life was very different for them. Jenny Stevens fell in love with John White, got married, and started having children. They had 5 children in all of whom were enslaved by Benjamin Stevens. So if you can imagine your grandfather owning you, holding you as a slave, that's the experience that Jenny and her children had. John White was being held by someone else who we believe was in financial trouble and was sold to a slave dealer, someone who would sell slaves for money. John White, knowing that he was going to be sold away from his family, away from his children, sought freedom across the Ohio River. So he escaped Boone County, escaped his new slaveholder, and made it up to Michigan. He, and with some help, were able to get Jenny and the 5 children onto boats on the Ohio River. The river was going very fast. So right above Rabbit Hash, they got into 2 skiffs, which are small wooden boats, and they were moving downriver, trying to get to Rising Sun across the river where there was a safe house. The river was moving too fast, and it got away from them, and the boats were out of control, and they ended up landing right near Benjamin Stevens' farm. They were caught by slave catchers. Jenny and the 5 children were in one boat. They were caught and they were taken back to Benjamin Stevens. John White was in a different boat. He managed to hide, and then eventually when he was caught, he gave a different name so nobody knew it was him. And eventually Levi Coffin was able to send help to rescue him and take him back up into Michigan and then into Canada. Now for Jenny, that was the last time she ever saw John White. Her slaveholder, Benjamin Stevens, was infuriated that she and the children tried to leave him. He couldn't understand why they didn't want to be enslaved. He couldn't understand why they wouldn't consider them having a good life, and it wasn't. Benjamin Stevens, as punishment, sent both Jenny and the 5 children to the auction block in central Kentucky. All 6 of them were sold to different slaveholders, and the family was split up all across Kentucky. And that's one of the things that was so tragic about this story is in her attempt to keep the family together, inevitably they were split up anyway. So why is it important to talk about Jenny's story and the story of other enslaved women and mothers in Boone County? Their story was a typical story, and they were really no different from any mother alive at any time. They had to, but in their case, they weren't able to have control over their body or their circumstances. Jenny's mother wasn't able to control who the father of her children were, right? Jenny wasn't able to keep her family together. There is a sense of inherent injustice that every mother feels. Can you imagine the panic of wanting all of your children together, and you're on the river and you see your husband's boat getting away from your boat, and you know you're going to be captured, you know you're going to be punished, you're worried that your husband's going to die if he's captured and they know who he is. This is the story of every enslaved woman in Boone County, in Kentucky, and all through the South. They had no control over their circumstances, and yet they chose to persevere and survive. So Boone County has been working on discovering the enslavement history in Boone County for many years. We started about 15 years ago. And we've been piecing together the stories for quite some time, because when I started in the department in 2005, nobody even really talked about enslavement in Boone County. So we wanted to make sure that they had a voice. So what were the lasting effects of the fear of being separated from your children, from your family? What were those effects on women who were enslaved? Well, let's look again at the story of Jenny. She wouldn't leave without her children. She was afraid for them. And the risk to her was the punishment that she inevitably received was she was separated from her family because she didn't stay put, she didn't stay on the farm enslaved by her own biological father. So that is not only a very real risk, it was a fact that slaveholders used children as leverage to keep women in control. And so Jenny's experience is the same as every other woman's experience in Boone County. Where, I mean, how would that make you feel? Knowing that if your mother chose to try to escape, you might be taken away from your other family members. You would never see your brothers again. You would never see your sisters again. You would never see your father again. So when we're talking about infanticide, which is the killing of young children, murdering of young children, and we're talking about Margaret Garner, who was probably the most well-known enslaved woman in Boone County. She escaped from Richwood, Kentucky, with her husband, her father and mother-in-law, and their 4 children. They made it up into Cincinnati, and they were immediately caught the next morning in Cincinnati as they were trying to contact Levi Coffin and find a way north. Margaret Garner, instead of letting her children be captured, tried to kill them and managed to kill one of her young daughters. And for most, you think that that's not you can't imagine doing that. I think it's important to realize that enslaved women, enslaved mothers, are no different from a mother today. They want a good life for their children. They want hope. They want to see their grandchildren. They want to be able to love their children. They want their children to be safe. That's no different today than it was back then. And I think sometimes when we look at history, it's very easy to just see history as a flat piece of paper with names and dates. But we need to understand that every person who lived history, who experienced those lives, had feelings, had people who they loved, who loved them, experienced happiness and sadness and death. They're just like us, except for they were not able to control the lives that they lived. And I think we need to look at them with a sense of empathy and a sense of understanding that they did the best they could with the circumstances they were in.